Chapter 17. The Labyrinth of Root. A deep, distant groan rumbled through the tunnels, like the breath of something ancient, shifting uneasily in its sleep. The air was thick with dust and dampness, the familiar sense of earth and metal, mixing with something acrid, something profoundly wrong. The further they traveled, the heavier the silence became, pressing around them like unseen hands. Terran walked ahead, his boots scraping softly against the rough stone floor. His grip on his axe tightened with each step. Along the tunnel walls, the veins of mana pulsed faintly, no longer radiant and pure but sickly, threaded through with streaks of deep crimson corruption. This was not how the mountain should feel. All his life he'd lived beneath the stone, listening to its whispers, feeling the steady heartbeat of the mountain underfoot. But ever since Maena's return, something had changed. Power that once filled dwarven halls with life now felt twisted and tainted. The mountain had become a battlefield, caught between darkness and light, and somewhere in the labyrinth beneath them, his people were lost. Tyron's mind wandered briefly to his last meeting with Thane Graldir, back in the warm torchlight of the dwarven council chamber. The great Thane had stood before the carved stone war table, hands braced heavily against it, weighed down by the burdens of leadership and fear. "I need you to see this through," Graldir had said, his voice gruff, burdened. "Not just for our kin, but to uncover the truth of what lies beneath." "You still think one of our own betrayed us?" Tyrion had asked, hesitant to even voice the terrible suspicion. Graldir exhaled sharply, his thick braids shifting. "I don't want to believe it, Tyrion, but the signs are clear. The deeper veins, the ancient wells once thought dormant, they weren't simply corrupted. Someone let that corruption in." The words had landed like a blow. The dwarves had spent generations shaping these tunnels, crafting their civilization in the heart of the mountain. The thought that their own had opened the gates for darkness was nearly unbearable. Nearly. "And the boy?" Tyrion had asked after a long silence. Graldir's brow furrowed deeply. "Aros. The return of mana follows him like the tides. If we are to fix this, then that boy may be the key." Now Tyrion cast a cautious glance toward Aros, who moved quietly beside Waya, fingertips brushing against the tunnel wall. His golden eyes flickered in the dim torchlight. The boy had become quieter since they'd entered the lower depths, his expression tense and distant. "He feels it too," Tyrion thought grimly. "The struggle beneath our feet, mana fighting itself." "These roots," Aros murmured suddenly, voice distant and haunted. "They're old." Waya glanced toward him, her grip tightening around her staff. "The world tree's roots don't reach this far south, child. They were severed during the cataclysm." Aros shook his head slowly, his expression distant. "Not these. These roots are older still, older than the gods themselves." Mako, silent until now, stepped closer. "Then why do they feel like they're dying?" No one had an answer. Irindra crouched low near a cluster of ancient rocks, fingertips brushing gently over faded runes etched into the stone. "These markings speak of balance. This was once a sacred chamber, where mana was channeled and directed. But look." She motioned toward the carvings, now twisted and corrupted, stained by shadow. Fenix exhaled sharply. "Shadowborn reached here before us?" Kaelin shook her head, troubled. These were corrupted long before mana surged back into the world." A heavy silence fell over the group, broken by Waya, who turned her attention to Tyrion, voice low and serious. "Your people who disappeared, what if they didn't vanish by accident? What if they became part of the corruption itself?" Tyrion tightened his grip on the axe handle, his jaw set firmly. That had been his fear all along, though voicing it felt like a betrayal in itself. Pip shifted restlessly, tossing her dagger into the air and catching it effortlessly. "We've been walking a while. Anyone else feel like we're heading straight into trouble?" Dolo's eyes scanned the darkness ahead. "We haven't reached trouble yet, but it's close." Another distant groan shook the tunnels, louder this time. Aros stopped abruptly, eyes widening in sudden realization. "It senses us." Tyron halted, feeling the stone beneath his feet tremble softly. The veins of mana flickered uneasily, their dim glow pulsing in rhythm with the mountain's growing unrest. Arindra stood swiftly, her gaze sharp and cautious. This corruption, it's active, alive. Whatever caused this is still down here, waiting. Kaelin pressed her hand to the wall, feeling the cold stone beneath her palm. She closed her eyes for a moment, then shuddered visibly. "There's pain here. Something fractured the mana. It's wounded." Aros met her gaze, nodding slowly. "The heart of the mountain is broken. It's trying to heal, but—" He hesitated, eyes flicking uncertainly through the shadows ahead. "But it can't," Waya finished quietly. "Not while something else feeds on the wound." The silence that followed was heavy and unsettling. Pip stopped tossing her dagger, sliding it nervously into its sheath. Even her restless energy had quieted, sensing the gravity of the moment. Dolo glanced around carefully, fingers tightening around his spear. "Then our path is clear. We find what's causing this, and we stop it." Terran nodded firmly. "Aye, whatever it is, it's waited too long. It ends now." They moved forward once more, footsteps cautious, every sense alert. The passage ahead narrowed, the walls pressing closer, carved rock giving way to exposed roots, twisted and darkened, pulsing faintly with corrupted mana. As they walked, Aros's breath quickened. His gaze darted nervously to the roots, their dark mana veins reaching toward them like grasping hands. Something was wrong. Something was terribly wrong. The ground beneath their feet groaned again, louder, closer. Aros stopped suddenly, his voice tight with urgency. "Wait!" The stone floor shuddered violently beneath their feet, causing dust to drift downward from the ceiling, the walls trembling ominously around them. They stood frozen, tense and uncertain, weapons raised as silence enveloped them again. Then, before anyone could speak, another deep, resounding groan rippled through the tunnel, shaking stone and root alike. The entire cavern felt like it was breathing, alive and angry. Irindra's eyes narrowed. "The corruption, it's moving." Aros's voice trembled as he whispered, "It's awake now." Tyrion gripped his axe tightly, heart pounding like a hammer striking stone. They'd reached the heart of the labyrinth, the source of corruption itself. This was the place the mountain feared, and now it knew they had arrived. The walls shuddered one final time, mana pulsing in twisted veins like a frantic heartbeat. And beneath their feet, unseen, ancient stone weakened, cracked, and began to fracture, ready to plunge them into darkness.